Anxiety is an over preoccupation with the past or the future. Like if I'm working with an athlete and they have anxiety or performance anxiety, it's almost always a future oriented thing or a past oriented thing. So they're thinking about what other people will think, what'll happen if I don't perform. Like they're all past and future. And to be able to say, okay, listen, I need you in these 17 seconds, or I need you in this present moment to be able to perform at your best. So understanding that anxiety is that over preoccupation with the past or the future is powerful, because that's where mindfulness comes in. Mm-hmm. Like mindfulness is teaching you to be aware of your surroundings, both mentally and physically and emotionally and psychologically and otherwise. So one of my key secrets in working with athletes, AI is interesting because it has a lot of the right answers, but it can't feel, at least yet. I finally figured out what mindset is and how to change it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fit and Frugal podcast. I am your host, Tawni Wynn. You can find me on IG at Tawnisaurus. So today, super exciting news. I have here someone incredibly human I met yesterday at the Legionnaire Mastermind. Gary, I'll let you introduce yourself because, Gary.
There you go. My name is Gary Chupik. I'm a mental performance coach from Seattle, Washington.
Cool. Oh, the rainy city. Like right before this, we were talking about colors and jewel tones and all of these fun things. And you know what I find really fascinating about you is that there's a lot of mental performance coaches that I've talked to. They're so serious. And when I met you, your energy is just radiating, like you're just so happy. And you kind of bring out like that childlike curiosity in other people.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Actually, it's kind of funny because when I'm in a locker room, I'm very different. Like all the juices start flowing and I get real serious. And I'm like, listen up, everyone. Like I'm a little bit different. I have an alter ego. Yeah. But just in general, I'm a pretty happy-go-lucky person.
Yeah. So you work with a lot of like sports athletes, top performers. So, talking about like the mental performance aspect, like what do you see or what have you witnessed as like being the biggest limiting beliefs or whatever blockage, the biggest challenge that you see them face overall?
Yeah, that's an outstanding question because there is a common trend amongst people who struggle mentally. And that is, and I think the number one thing is they overthink. So they actually have too many thoughts going on in their head, and so that those thoughts weigh them down. So think of thoughts like calories. So if you have too many calories, and then you feel lethargic and you can feel overweight and you slow down and you might go into that carb overload, right? Like it just literally slows you down. And so when you have too many thoughts that you can't expend, like too many calories, right? If you don't expend those calories, you gain weight. In the same way in mental performance, if you have too many thoughts and you don't sort of police those, then they slow you down and you get lethargic. And so one of the things I teach my clients is that, hey, you just got to think less. Like you got to think less. And so for example, in baseball, there's 17 seconds between pitches. And so I want to control all 17 seconds. Because if I can control all 17 seconds, then the athlete's not thinking about the pretty girl in the stands or what they're going to do after the game, or they don't have time to be anxious or nervous. They have to go through a protocol in those 17 seconds. So the idea is, don't overthink things. Like you're thinking too much. You have to trust your instincts and trust your training.
I'm kind of absorbing that because it sounds so profoundly easy to do, like just do less and think less. Mm-hmm. So therefore, I'm overthinking because I'm overcompensating and overcorrecting myself. Like, am I thinking too much now? So I'm counting my thoughts as we go, which is 18 thoughts away from the 17 seconds. So if you're watching my face right now, that it's like that meme of like the calculations, like, okay, is this a thought? Oh, it's got to go away.
Yeah.
And it kind of comes down to the art of like being so self-aware that you can actually witness your thought and being present with yourself, right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. So on average, like we don't know for sure, but the best neuroscience tells us is that we have approximately 70,000 thoughts per day. Approximately 70. They think between 60 and 90, but let's say 70,000. And you can only control probably about 10% of them. So 90% are unconscious thoughts. And 10% are only conscious thoughts. But your brain works so fast and your brain picks up so many things. Like, for example, you have something in your brain called mirroring neurons. And so what that is like, when someone walks into a room and like you instantly feel a certain way about them, like instantly, that are even faster than your thoughts.
Yeah.
And so you feel something. Those are called mirroring neurons. And so your brain is doing all types of calculations without you even knowing. So, for example, if I said, look at something on a shelf for like a millisecond and then turn it back away and look at me, you would have about 30 things you could say about the thing that you saw. You just don't process it that way. So, like, for example, if you looked at that, the white statue on the shelf over here, and then you stopped, and then I could ask you 30 questions about that, and you would be able to tell me the answer to all of them.
Oh,
So
that
your
it's a
your
lion.
brain,
Yeah.
yeah. So your brain works so fast, and so the idea is, out of the 10% of the thoughts that you can control, we want to make sure that we can control those controllables. We want to make sure that we have mastery over that 10%, because what will happen is that 10% will then begin to inform your subconscious thoughts. And so once your subconscious thoughts begin to be informed by your conscious thoughts, and then you actually feel a lot better about your life.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy you said the subconscious and we're only able to control 10%. A lot of that, does that have to do with like neuroplasticity and a lot of similar work to like Joe Dispenza's work? You know how he's huge into that.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
field.
I think so. So a lot of it is being aware, being
Yeah.
aware of your thoughts. Like in my system that I teach professional athletes and people in business, is when we're teaching mental performance, there's three different aspects. You have awareness, you have education, and you have application. So that awareness is that you're aware of, oh man, like I'm thinking a thought, like, and I need to be aware of that. And is this thought that I'm thinking producing anything for me? And if it's not producing anything for me, and then maybe I should let it go. Maybe I should like literally let this go. But we're not even aware of our thoughts. So if we can become aware of a thought that's not producing anything for us, and then maybe we should let go of it, because we accept so many things without even thinking about it, about ourselves and about the world. So you have to become aware of something. In fact, Dr. Jordan Peterson says the number one trait amongst all successful people is self-awareness. It is the greatest predictor of success of all of the traits. And so being aware is crucial. If you're not aware, you don't really change.
Yeah.
So, and then educate yourself is like, yeah, do your learning, do your part. Like, but don't overlearn. Don't think too much, because you could eat, like an apple's a good thing, but if you ate 100 apples in a
Yeah.
day, right? You took in even a good thing, you took in too much of it and you'll still get fat.
Yeah. So I heard two things that came out of that I found really fascinating that you said. So when you're unaware and it goes back to subconscious, like do you feel that that's the root of anxiety and why people overthink that leads them to just living on autopilot? And, two, the second thing is if you're unaware of your thoughts, how does that play a role in how you're behaving, right? Because
Yeah, those
you're
are
unaware of yourself.
two great questions. So your first one was, remind me what your first question was?
So the subconscious is like if you are unaware of your thoughts, you're pretty much not in control of the 10% of your conscious mind.
Right.
So does that lead to anxiety and you just living
Anxiety.
on
Yes.
autopilot,
Yes.
default,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call
So
it?
so anxiety is an over preoccupation with the past or the future. Anxiety is an over preoccupation with the past or the future. So think of it like an hourglass that has sand in it. The top is the future, right? So time is passing, and the bottom is the past. And right in the middle is your present moment. And so that over preoccupation with the past or future is the source of all anxiety. And so learning to be in that present moment and being fully present where you are in the moment 100% without your thoughts being somewhere else. Like if I'm working with an athlete and they have anxiety or performance anxiety, it's almost always a future-oriented thing or a past-oriented thing. So they're thinking about what other people will think, what'll happen if I don't perform. I couldn't perform yesterday, so I'm probably not going to perform well today. Like they're all past and future. And to be able to say, okay, listen, I need you in these 17 seconds, or I need you in this present moment to be able to perform at your best. So understanding that anxiety is that over preoccupation
Yeah.
with the past or the future is powerful, because that's where mindfulness comes in. Like mindfulness is teaching you to be aware of your surroundings, both mentally and physically and emotionally and psychologically and otherwise. So yeah, it's an important it's an important piece in performance to live in the present moment.
And I take that for myself too, because I think we're so conditioned to be craving chaos because that's the familiarity. As you constantly need stimulation, you need the world around you to reflect how you feel on the inside. And when you brought up mindfulness, a lot of people ask me, they're like, hey, since you've worked on this like self-mastery journey, like does it become boring? And lately that's the kind of word that I've been hearing, is that like, oh, like meditation is so boring. I'm like, it's really not, because it's not really a mindful state that you're in. You're just collecting thoughts. Like, you're not trying to empty your mind. You're just trying to witness your thoughts come and try to get to the root of why you're thinking those thoughts.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like an inception thing. But I got to make a joke when you're like, I need you in the 17 seconds in performance. And most men would love to hear that if that was the case, right?
Right, that's right.
I need you to be there for 17 seconds.
Yeah.
Say less.
Yeah, exactly.
When did you find your gift, and how was that moment like for you when you discover, like, this is my gift and this is how I help other humans, like, reach their full potential?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I was a pastor, an ordained pastor for 27 years. And so have sort of been in the helps industry for a long time. And there's different kinds of pastors, just like there are different kinds of leaders. And so my primary style was coaching, because I always like to leave things open-ended. I don't like to make statements and make everyone else believe them. I was just like, here's a situation, or here's a story, and what do you guys think? Like, what are we going to do about this? Like, what are our options? What do you think? And so I've always been a very, very much an open-ended, and very much am a believer in people. Like, I believe, everybody believes in an ideology and is passionate about their ideologies, and our tastes change, we evolve and grow as human beings. But being a believer in people is constant, and I believe in the power of people. So after I was done pastoring, because I had experienced a burnout, I had a kind of a quiet, but basically a quiet year, where I was just sort of contemplating my life. I was going to have, I thought, well, this is a great time to have a midlife crisis in my late 40s, right? Like, I'm going to go buy like a Buick or something, or, I want to, yeah. I want to, like, what should I do for my midlife crisis? Should I have an affair? Should I buy a Buick? Like, I don't know. So I decided to hit a hard reset button in my life and kind of like be mindful, right? Like take note of what I was thinking, what I was going through. So this idea of like coaching had always sort of been my thing. And I was a high school athlete and a little bit of a college athlete. So I've always loved the mental part. And then I ended up getting in touch with some pretty amazing people that introduced me to Trevor Moawad. Trevor Moawad was the mental performance coach for Russell Wilson of the Seattle Seahawks and Denver Broncos. And so we started spending some time together, and he was like, why don't you take all that pastor stuff that you know and apply it to mental performance? And like, there's a lot of commonality in your coaching. And so he kind of mentored me for a year, which was a super incredible experience. And then he said, well, show me what you got. Like, what's your plan for helping people mentally? And so I showed it to him, and he goes, damn, that's good. Like, that's really good. And they hired me on the spot.
Wow.
And so it was, I went from, pastor, which I actually never wanted to be, ever. I never wanted to be a pastor, ever. But I did it for 27 years. But I never wanted to.
Why did you get into pastoring? Like, how?
Well, a little bit is, a little bit of his environment, right? Yeah. Like, it's nature and nurture, right? But a little bit is environment. A little bit was kind of what I wanted to do with my life, which was help people. I just kind of didn't know how to help people. And I thought being a pastor would be a great way to do that, you know? And so I never really wanted to do it, but I did it as an act of obedience. And an act of sacrifice. So I did it, but I really struggled enjoying it for 27 years. Yeah. And then when I had it wasn't really a nervous breakdown, but just like a burnout. And then when I hit that burnout, and I was like, okay, now I can hit the reset button in my life. I'm not going to have an affair. I'm not going to buy a Buick. I'm going to rethink what I want to do with my life. And so I kept thinking, like, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? And then I realized that, man, if I could answer that question, the stars would align for me personally. So I thought, man, this mental performance stuff just lights me up, and helping people. And so I pursued that with all of my heart. I just jumped right in, and then the world opened up to me. Because so much of life, you feel like you're walking into the wind, right? Yeah. Like, it's hard. Like, you're trying to figure you out, and you're trying to figure life out. And so when I kind of jumped in with both feet, and I started to figure a couple of things out, and then I thought, well, I got to take a risk, and so I took this risk of mental performance, and surrounded myself with the right people, and got lucky a few times with being connected. And I got a call from the Seattle Seahawks asking if I would be part of a pilot program, which was a totally random call. I don't even know how they got my phone number, but I ended up getting connected in that. That was a big part of my journey. And then I thought, well, I wonder if I could like charge somebody for my coaching. Like I wonder if they'd pay me like $20 an hour, you know?
Yeah.
And so I was just I would, get a few clients and then just say, hey, it's $20 an hour. They're like, oh, sure, you're a great deal. I'm like, okay. So then it was 40, then it was 100, then it was 200, and then it was 300, 500, then it was 1,000, and then it's like thousands. So, I wish I made thousands every hour, but I don't. But you just have to believe in yourself, and you have to take those steps of courage. But a lot of it's believing in yourself like that. It all starts with self-belief, because imagine I'm holding a cup. And this cup represents how much I believe in myself. That if I put in the work and I put in the training and I'm dedicated, what's possible. And so everybody leaks at something, right? So if you say my self-confidence or my self-belief is a 5, no matter what gets poured into you, you're going to leak at a 5. It won't matter what gets poured into you, how much you learn, how much you have people speak into your life. You'll always leak at a 5 because that's what your self-belief is. If your self-belief is a 7, you'll always leak at a 7. If it's a 3, you'll always leak. You'll always leak at the level of your self-belief. So my job is to help people be a 10 so they can live out of the overflow of their self-belief. And all of a sudden now it's game on. Like what's possible when you really believe in yourself?
Yeah. I love the cup analogy because lately it's, all about self-care, self-compassion, kindness, offering yourself grace so that you can actually, it's always about filling your cup first. And I love that you brought up the cup thing because I feel like I envisioned a ship first, but you saw the many thoughts that went to my head. But I feel like those leaks that you're talking about, a lot of people try to slap a Band-Aid externally on the outside as like, this will be the fix. The money will fix it. The external validation will fix it. The social validation or whatever, social media will fix all of my problems if I can show the world who I think I should be. And I love that you brought that up, that you didn't want to do it, but it's something that you thought you should have done because you went down the path of chasing, like, maybe this is who I am. And you kind of aligned to that for 27 years it's a huge acknowledgement in your time and your devotion to your craft of even discovering who you are. So I want to acknowledge you for how authentic you're being in your midlife crisis. And I'm glad you didn't buy a Buick. I'm really happy.
It was either that or a Monte Carlo, It was,
but so you said you went through your quiet season, right? Which a lot of people it's really hard for because we idolize that season as like either a depressive episode or a depressive season, or we attach it to some sort of mental health crisis. I've had many midlife crises, and I'm in my 30s. And you feel like it's the doom and gloom, like it's the end of the world. It's either I end my life now or I end the life that I'm currently living so that I can actually wake up and design a life. What was your biggest obstacle and challenge that you faced in that season to really bring you out into the light of who you are?
Yeah. You ask insightful questions. Way to go. So I think we all hear voices.
Ooh.
And I think we all have inner advertising campaigns where voices are trying to sell us something. And when we can identify those voices, it's really helpful. But some of those voices, whether it's ours or somebody else in our life, they're really loud. And so I like to think of it like a knob, like a volume knob. And how can I turn down the volume of these voices in my life? Some of them I can turn them all the way down to 0 where I eliminate them. But sometimes it takes some time to turn down the volume and some distance away from those voices. And so it's like, pay attention and be aware of the voices that are in your head telling you things. And I'm not much for listening to myself anymore. I'm more about talking to myself. Because if I listen, like a lot of those are subconscious thoughts and subconscious voices in our heads, but I don't find them terribly helpful. I think, if I can learn to talk to myself, then I can encourage myself. Then I can tell myself where I want to be. Now I can tell myself what I want to do with my life. And I turn down. So I think during that dark time or that more quiet time in my life, it was like, I felt like I was in a coffin, to be honest. It was like, I feel trapped and I don't know how to get out. I'm confused. I'm emotionally exhausted. And I felt like I was in a coffin. And the way I describe it, it's like a cat being in a box, like you're trying to scratch out of the box, right? And I felt like I was dying in a way. And then there was like this quiet, still voice. I call it God, but people can call it whatever they want. But I heard this phrase just out of the clear blue, and it was let death do its work in you. Like let some things die so that new things can rise. But I was holding on to so many things, like this is who I am, this is what I want to do, but I needed to let some things die. And so don't rush the death. Just let death do its work in you, and then you can start with a clean slate.
Oh my God, I have like chills, Lana. Can you see the goosebumps from there? No, that is really powerful because that's exactly the feeling I resonate with, is that really lonely season to where you think it's the end. But I now, a few years from my previous midlife crisis, I've identified those feelings and those limiting beliefs and those voices
Those
that you
voices.
mentioned. I couldn't label them until you've just now kind of like really put a word just to describe, because I feel like a lot of people do feel stuck. They feel lonely. They just can't label. It's just like if you go to therapy for the first time, they're like, how are you feeling? I didn't know how I was feeling. I couldn't even tell you like more than 3 emotions.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm good. I'm okay.
Yeah, right, right.
Medium-ish, medium.
But the language of the
know?
soul is
Yeah.
that's challenging, because think of it like a well. And down in the well, you have this pot, and the pot is like what you think and your feelings, and I mean all of your soul, right? Like it's and our job is to take the time to pull up that pot because it's dark and wet down there, and our job is to pull up that pot and expose it to the light, and then we can kind of go, oh, that's what I think, or oh, that's who I am, or like, oh, like yeah, no, I don't want that. Like why am I entertaining these thoughts or have these relationships or these friendships that they're just not producing anything for me? And so part of our job is to like put ourselves in a position to bring up the pot and expose it to the light. And then once it's exposed and it's on the surface, then we can go, oh yeah, do I want to live with that? It's pretty scummy. There's gross things in that pot. Like, no, I want to change.
Yeah.
I want to evolve.
Yeah. And I love the pot thing because I call it like a plant, right? Because you can put your roots in soil, but the more you water it with all the negative things, your environment, people, places, things, just habits, just anything, like the micro habits that you add to yourself, if before you even take the roots up and start over fresh. I think the process of unbecoming, it's kind of like ripping out your roots and just letting it kind of dry
Oh,
a
my
little bit
goodness.
and just getting rid of the soil.
Oh, yeah.
That process is so nasty. It's so
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
challenging.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
you don't realize that's exactly what you're doing. Because yeah, you probably know like you should work out, you should eat somewhat healthy 80% of the times, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people, I feel like they're still stacking habits and all these healthy things on top of like really rotten soil.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't
So
really
good.
add much to it, right? That value.
That's
that
so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. It's interesting how sometimes, like, we have internal work that we do, but then there's the external work that we do. And the internal work is the stuff that we're talking about. The external work is when a plant's not growing, you get mad at the plant for not growing? No, you say, maybe the soil isn't the right soil. Maybe it's not the right pH level. Maybe it's not, and then you say, I wonder if it's in the right environment. Like maybe it shouldn't be in the sun and it's in the sun. So it's a soil issue and it's an environment issue. So how can we change our environment to really match how we feel and who we are and where we want to go?
Yeah.
So sometimes we need to do that external work. The other thing that I really love about what you said that sort of triggered a thought for me was the pulling up of the plant. So, a lot of people have a vision for their life, and but one of the things that made a huge impact on me, and I spend a lot of time meditating and in prayer and reading and whatever. But I was closing my eyes one day, and I was just sort of thinking about my life, and I grew up in a little town in Saskatchewan, Canada, and it was like if it's a little pot, it's like this big. It's like a little tiny pot, right? And it's like I'm a plant in a small pot, and then I feel like the roots were painfully ripped out of that. And then I moved to Seattle and got married. Not that was painful, but just the transition was a pretty big transition. And then I saw myself in this bigger pot in Seattle, and then I started to lead a congregation. I actually started it from scratch, by the way, but I feel like that was a pretty big shift. And then I ended up getting involved in some regional things, and that was another transplant. So you loosen those roots again, which is painful because you can hear them tear,
Yeah.
right? And then you pull it up and you put that plant in a bigger pot with more soil. And then I started to do some national things, and that was a bigger pot. And the entire time I'm sort of identifying what these pots are in my life. And then I started doing some international work, and I thought, man, this is a garden. Like now the pot's getting big. Now it's a garden. And when you think about it, there's a lot of when when a plant grows, especially like fruit or wheat, the seeds have to like the plant part of the plant has to die, right? And in order for it to reproduce, parts of it have to die so that it can grow into a garden and grow into a field. And so now I feel like in my life, I feel like, okay, now I'm not in the garden anymore. I'm in a field. And so now it's international and as big as I want it to be. And so now I'm like, okay, how do I position myself in such a way as to be as effective I can in in the influence that I want to have on an international basis? But there's still parts of me that have to die. So even though I'm a mental performance coach and I should have everything down, right? I should have a mind of steel. But we all have insecurities, right? Like we're not good at everything. And so part of my challenge is like, more levels, more devils. It's like once you reach a plateau, and you can look back and you can say, man, I'm so glad I took those risks and I put in the effort and that was hard. And then you sort of look back where you were and you say how beautiful the scenery is, but then there's another whole hill or mountain to climb.
Yeah.
And it's scarier. And every level is scarier than the previous. But you've learned to tolerate the discomfort, and you learn to sort of talk, not listen to yourself, but talk to yourself. Like, hey, you know what? I did this last one. I can probably do this one if I work hard enough.
Yeah. A lot of that, does it have to do with your ability to emotionally regulate yourself as well? Because I feel like limiting beliefs, negative self-talk, self-doubt especially is really tied to deeply rooted issues. I love that you brought that up because we're always projecting insecurities,
Yeah.
not just outward into others, but into the relationship with ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's why we have that constant battle with
It's
the
true.
voices, the constant battle of like, how come people say I'm great, but I don't see it?
Yeah.
And the person in the mirror, that conversation that you have is really the most important one, and people can't even face themselves.
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not enough. And I think that's the root of everything for everyone, right?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think there's a human way to answer that question, and there's a mental performance way to answer that question.
Yeah.
So one of my key secrets in working with athletes is something called neutral thinking. So we know that positive thinking has some good effect. Okay, there's some good effect. I think for the average person, positive thinking has a lot of effect. But for an elite athlete, it's actually not very important. Negative thinking really works. It just works for the negative, right? It actually is very detrimental. We know if you keep telling yourself that you're a loser, you'll probably do things that losers do, right? But neutral thinking is different. It's not ignoring your feelings. It's postponing them to accomplish a task. So in the present moment, we talked about that hourglass. If you want to perform at a high level in the present moment, you can't be too emotional. You just sort of put your mind and your soul into neutral so that you can accomplish a task.
Yeah.
So we call it neutral thinking. Not overly positive, not overly negative. All I'm doing is focusing on what I need to do. And you're going to be really hard to beat if you can be in neutral thinking a lot.
Yeah.
So neutral thinking is really a key, but it's a way to manage emotions. And so, I mean, when's the worst time in the world for an athlete who's just played a game that they lost? When's the worst time in the world for him or her to evaluate their performance? Like right after the
Right
game.
after.
Yeah, like it's the worst time. And really the reason why you evaluate is to get better, to learn. You're not learning much when you're like emotionally jacked up, right? Like
Yeah.
you're not learning much. And so what if I postponed my emotions or scheduled my emotions for 9 a.m. on a Monday morning so that I'm more together, so I can learn better from my performance and not be so emotional?
Yeah. It's funny you said like scheduling your feelings. It kind of reminds me of the previous conversation we had with you're working on a project with AI. I don't know how that got triggered into this my thought right now, but you know how now we're optimizing obviously our health internally, externally, and we're also using AI because that's the future, the way the algorithm works and everything is so heavily digitalized that you know everything that you do is in the process of creation of doing less just so you can do more of the important things. But do you feel that as a person that's AI friendly, do you feel that that's going to affect the way we make human connection and just be able to connect with other people just like you and I are right now?
Yeah. It's interesting because one of the powerful things about our conversation, even right now, is that there's an emotional and relational dynamic, right? That's very fluid. And AI is interesting because it has a lot of the right answers, but it can't feel, at least yet. So, I mean, AI can, they're saying that AI will eventually be sentient, and that's very possible. But I still think, and I think COVID proved this, that we are still an experiential people. I think there's still an experiential economy. And so I think the AI can put us in a position to better experience the experiences, right? So AI can be helpful in us getting together. AI can be helpful in setting us up. But in terms of the conversations and the depth that we have, we are talking about, like even right now, we're talking about the soul and we're talking
Yeah.
about our bodies and how they interact, and we're talking about the mind and the subconscious mind. And but there's a human element, and those mirroring neurons are connecting with one another even faster than our thoughts. And so I think there's limitations that we're not yet aware of. Like for example, have you ever seen the movie Minority Report?
Heard of it, never seen
Yeah,
it.
so it's like instead of a computer screen, it's this like this big wide transparent screen, and you're moving your hands, and like it's just this unbelievably technological, dynamic, really cool scene. And but yet, if you really were to think about it, the reason why it's not successful is because it's exhausting to move your hands over for hours and hours and hours. And it's so interesting to me. It's like, oh yeah, there's still a human element
Yeah.
to the AI and to the technology, and no one can move their hands around like this on a screen, for 8 hours in a day. And when you think about it, a mouse is actually a really good idea because you just have to move your finger and wrist,
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, wait a minute, like the technology is super cool, but there's a human element to it that limits the technology. And so I think in the same way, I think people still long for experiences, and we found out with COVID that Zoom doesn't really work that much anymore. People, their stock has gone down. People want to be. The companies are calling people back because there's a human dynamic that I'm not sure AI can replace, and maybe it can with computers and robots and things like that. But and maybe they'll become more sentient. But I think we're a ways off from that.
Yeah. I'm hearing that use AI to actually optimize your time
Yes.
so that it can allow you to make more money as a resource because money is a tool so that you can free up your most powerful resource, which is time, so that you can spend it to make human
It's
connections.
so true.
But what we're afraid of is like, how's the kids going to turn out?
Yeah,
Because they're
yeah,
so addicted
exactly.
to the iPads. If they're put in
Exactly.
2 chairs and forced to have a conversation, they're going to be like,
Yeah, it's rather than hilarious because most of us want to use the AI so we can have more experiences.
yeah. So, what advice would you kind of leave here? I love your energy, man. It's so, I don't know where we came with
It's
like
so cool.
this thought, and I can feel my synapses firing off too.
Yeah.
And I have a billion more questions for you, but I want to
Yeah.
be mindful of your time, obviously. But like, what advice would you give someone that's obviously not an athlete, just a regular human being that want to change their life, that wants to optimize who they are, to just start doing, just to become their full potential?
Well, can I circle back on something that you asked me
Yeah.
a little while ago, and I think it'll sort of orbit the answer a little bit. So mindset is crucial because things always happen twice. They happen in your mind first, and then they happen in real life. So they happened in your mind first. You imagine it, you think about it, you have thoughts, and then you go and execute. So having a healthy mindset is really crucial. And so I've spent the last probably 25 years thinking about mindset, and then the last 5 years intensely thinking about mindset. And then I would say in the last year, I finally figured it out. I finally figured out what mindset is and how to change it. It's taken me like thousands of hours to figure this out, and I think I finally did it. So when I hear definitions of mindset, I go, that's terrible, or that's nothing. And so I'm a little arrogant that I think I figured it out, but I think I did. So where does mindset come from? And if you figure out where mindset comes from, then you can figure out how to change it.
Yeah.
So mindset, if you think about mindset, the very first thing it begins with is an experience. You have an experience in your life that either happens to you or you participated it in some way. So you have an experience. And then in brackets, think of this like a physics equation, right? Then in brackets, you have thoughts and feelings associated with that experience. And I don't know which one comes first always, the thought or the feeling, but you do have thoughts and feelings associated with that experience. And what happens then is you get to choose, sort of like an equal sign, you get to choose your response. You get to choose your response to an experience that you've had in your life, and your thoughts and feelings about it, you get to choose. So you get to choose your how you respond to those things. But it doesn't end there. If you put all of that together, the experience, the thoughts and feelings associated with that experience, plus my response, now you've created a belief. That now you believe something, and you believe it because you had this experience, you had thoughts and feelings about it, and that you created a response, and now you have a belief. And if you put all of that together, now you have a mindset.
Wow.
So now you have a mindset, but it doesn't end with mindset, because if all I do is change somebody's mindset, but it doesn't result in new and improved behaviors, then it's just stuck in your mind. I need it to sort of manifest in your life. So you have an experience, thoughts and feelings associated with the experience, plus my response that creates a belief, that creates a mindset. But your mindset must always result in new and improved behaviors. So now I'm going to behave differently because I've changed my mindset. And those behaviors, if you think about them, are actually new experiences. So it cycles back to the beginning. So now I can create new experiences for myself that are healthier and positive. And now I can create new and improved thoughts and feelings associated with that experience. And I can create a better response to those things. And now I can create better beliefs about my life. And now I have literally improved my mindset. And now that results in new and improved thoughts, behaviors. And now I've created a new experience, and I keep cycling. I keep building my mindset like this. And so, so here's the trick. The trick in all of that is your response to experiences and your thoughts and your feelings. It's your response. So if I'm working with a client and I notice that their mindset's really terrible, I'll say, what happened? Because that's the experience. And I'll say, well, how did that make you think and feel? Made me think and feel, well, how did you respond? Oh, well, I went into a shell. That was so traumatic for me. I went into a shell and I isolated myself. And so what did you believe? Oh, I believed that this situation's dangerous, or this situation is bad, or these people are bad, or whatever. I'm like, oh, and so you created a belief that informs your mindset. So now I invite my clients to go back to the experience, the thoughts and the feelings, and especially their response. Because the question I'd like to ask is, so if you could coach yourself and whisper in your 14-year-old ear about that experience, what advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, I think I would hear myself say now,
Yes,
in my 30s,
exactly.
the story that you create for yourself is much louder than what actually happened.
Bingo.
And you can rewrite that narrative.
You got it.
Yeah.
You just coached yourself.
Whew!
You just coached yourself. And so now what do you want to believe?
Wow.
Now what do you want to believe about your life? What do you want to believe about you? And if you can say, you know what, I think I figured out that I'm pretty resilient. I didn't give up. I went through hell for too long. I entertained poor and negative, unproductive thoughts. But I pulled myself out of it. And I think when I face things from now on, I think I just need to believe in myself.
Wow. I'm at a loss for words.
That's okay.
Thank you so
okay.
much, Gary.
You're welcome.
Where can people connect with you? Is it on Instagram? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of my athletes
best
are my
hangout spot.
clients. Yeah, they're all there, and so Instagram is the best thing under Elite Mindset, and my website is elitemindsetnation.com.
Thank you so much for your time and
You're
being
welcome.
here. All right, that's it for us today. Again, I'm Tawni. You can find me at Fit and Frugal Pod or Tawnisaurus on IG. Stay fit and stay frugal. Thanks.